Yeah, you're right. Okay. All righty. So if you've been in my cybersecurity sessions, one of the rules was do not pick up stray stranger USB ports or sticks on the parking lot and stick it in because you don't know what's going to happen. Meet the USB sticks. Now, Veritify is one of our latest partners in that we've been working with them for how long now?
Over a year.
Yeah, a little over a year. Yeah.
Quickly, 16 months.
Yeah. So, and we've been going on several job sites and drinking beer together and so forth. Really good group of guys. And so this is Louis and Derek and Drake from Veritify, and take it away.
All right. Any questions? It's Friday. We can go. No, it's like. Anyways, we'll step through this relatively quickly, and in fact, I think discussion will be good. And some of you we've already met with and know some of the topics. So, but the focus that we want to put on it will be a little bit more why you should be partnering with us and KMC to bring this to the market. So some of this you will have seen before, but it's going to have a little bit of a different tone because in here now I will be asking, as will Derek and Drake, to please join us in what we're doing. I will apologize up front for some of you. A few of my slides are repeats from the emerging cyber, just to set the stage, but I will assure you that Derek, who's going to give you a technical underpinning of what we do and how we do it, and Drake is going to show you what it looks like when we take it to the field, will definitely be new. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what our partnership looks like. So again, very, very briefly, our goal today is to introduce our solution. And we want to enlist you as a KMC partner to join the partner program that we've put together to bring this unique offering to your customers. So really, really quickly, I want to talk a little bit today about what security is and the challenges in buildings, what you face out there, and then introduce Dome. And Dome is our platform that we have taken from industrial IoT and created a building automation specific platform with the support of KMC, Intel, and AWS. We've been demoing it. Some of you I know have been by to see what it looks like. Here we'll talk a little bit about how we got there. A technical overview, as I mentioned, by Derek, who is our CTO and the chief architect of the platform, followed by what it looks like if you take it into the field to your customers by Drake, who is our VP of engineering and is responsible for implementing what you might have seen in the other room. And then we'll talk a little bit about what the partnership looks like going forward. So again, why are we here talking about it? Because buildings are connecting more and more, plain and simple. You've been doing it for a period of time. And of course, people go where there is value, and there is value in buildings, both from the positive and from the negative. So we are seeing more and more issues in the news today. Those issues, as we see it, are wide-ranging. Everything from tenant safety to productivity to even building reputation. Your customers or clients probably don't want to be that office building downtown that got shut down for 3 days by a hacker from Hungary. That probably doesn't go away too quickly, and that's great local news. So once that happens, and no matter why it happened or how it happened, that is a valuation issue. So there's negative reasons and there's positive reasons. Some of the earlier talks you probably heard, Building Cybersecurity Org and others who both KMC and ourselves are members of are working to provide evaluations of buildings who will be using technologies like ours. And if they do take these remedial steps, perhaps their insurance rates will go down. If you're familiar with things like LEEDs, where it's increased the value of buildings that are LEED certified, a building that is cyber certified or cyber safe, hopefully will add to its value. So just wrapping up, why are we talking about it today? This is a 3-week-old, and what's kind of exciting and a little scary, these types of surveys are coming out weekly, if not more, about what's happening out there. And as I mentioned in my emerging when I use this, the second, third, fourth bullets are kind of the key ones and exciting, and simply just says there's a large audience out there who recognize they have an issue and are looking for solutions. And again, we are looking to put together our solution for the purpose of being able to take it to the market. And not only that, but the fourth bullet which is they're looking to do things the next 12 or 18 months. Again, we want to talk about partnerships that have immediate value and benefit going to the market today, and I think it is there. So the other side of it is some of you talk to building owners. We're going to talk a little technology in here and try and again explain some of the underpinnings of our solution. When you're talking some of the engineering or some of the people that you work with in implementing systems, that's great and wonderful, but you may be talking to a building owner when he says, hey, I know you're going to be doing our HVAC system, and you say, well, you want to make it secure. And he said, why? So this type of news is now appearing more and more in the public domain. So it's not happening in, Cyber News Daily, the Wall Street Journal, and your local newspapers and what have you. So just turning to what is security and what we're providing and doing, and I want to point out a significant differentiation because we will talk to people sometimes say, oh yeah, no, we've got security. And oftentimes a building owner, when they say that, is really referring to their BMS system, which is now connected to the cloud. And they've got an IT group who have made sure it's securely connected. That's very, very important. But typically they have nothing going below it into the building, which is an exposure. And I want to differentiate because there are great solutions, and I brought this up in our emerging cyber, and I want to differentiate, because if you do go to a building owner and say, I have a solution I think you should hear about, and they go, oh no, we got security, they may have a monitoring, they may even gone as far as to have a monitoring solution, something monitoring their networks. And again, IT world has done this for years, and in fact, many great IT vendors have moved into this space, because if the OT, if your building network is an IP platform, you can take those tools and run it on these platforms and tell somebody when somebody bad is on the network. Some of you, and our initial platform is Bacnet, and in particular Bacnet IP. We are also addressing Bacnet MSTP with our security. So I would suggest some of those tools will not work on Bacnet MSTP. They must be an IP network, so they have a limited visibility and capability. They're still important, and the analogy I used the other day is, if you have a house, you probably want to have an alarm system because you want to know if there's a fire or somebody breaking in. You still need to call somebody to address it, because maybe you can't, and the building owner would have to call an IT person, but at the same time, proactively, you still probably want to lock your doors and windows. And we are the locks and keys for that. So we're actually providing the real-time protection to the devices, daily, minute, nanosecond, whatever time frame you want to give it. So we're proactively trying to stop those intrusions and things, and that's the differentiator. I don't think you do one or the other, and we could discuss what's important or not. I think they're both valid. I would not tell you don't know if there's a bad guy in your house. And the same way I'd say just because you're locking the door every day, you should stop now or not. Both very, very important. So I just want to distinguish what we're doing. So we're actually protecting at the device level in the building, and we're going to describe how in a couple of slides. So just to wrap up my section in introducing it, there's some challenges in securing a building, some of which we might have been aware of, some of which we were totally not aware of. We were actually brought to this industry from where we typically operate in industrial IoT by Intel a few years ago. So we looked at the market, and we were educated in what's going on and realized that, again, OT networks, 20 years behind IT networks when it comes to security. I'm being gracious there because we haven't really seen device level security like you have in the IT world, period, so maybe it's even more than 20 years. We recognize that there are some solutions, if you can connect to the cloud, that's really, really good, but we're also challenged because some of the projects we look at, particularly when it comes to federal buildings, if you have federal buildings in your territory or government or DoD, they don't want to be connected to the cloud 24/7. They want to be what's called air-gapped. They don't want the building connected to the outside world. That's a challenge. There's existing unsecured systems, and by the way, those systems may need to co-reside with the devices you're putting in, which you now want to secure. And that challenge needs to be addressed. Finally, tools to ensure secure installation. This was actually pointed out both by Intel and then educated from our friends at KMC that a device could cost $500 or cost $2,500 and may cost equal that amount for you to install it. And that's, a fair and valid situation. So it's gone beyond just physically putting it on a DIN rail or wiring it in. It's putting it on a network, and you've had to acquire network skills. My education was, everybody, that's Wireshark. We know what it is because you're working with it. But now the next step is, do you know how to do TLS provisioning? And what's involved in managing certificates and cybersecurity. So the skill labor that is going to go into it is going to be a challenge. And finally, we realized that the protocols that we were being shown were things we hadn't seen before. You know, we do Wi-Fi, we do BLE, we do whatever in terms of wired, wireless, and then we heard this thing, Bacnet. And I said, oh, you know, my thing was, oh, I played that in Las Vegas. But no, not. And not only that, but then there's a Bacnet IP thing, and there's a Bacnet MSTP thing, and there's this thing called Bacnet Sc coming. We happen to address all of them for different reasons and purposes we'll talk about. But that was another challenge. And by the way, the biggest challenge in terms of bringing a solution to market, and again, as we've talked about it, is that most of the market opportunity is already there. The buildings are built, they exist. And in fact, if they're not putting in a new system, and again, you have opportunities to put in net new systems, but you may have installed a system 4 or 5 years ago. And as I've been told, if it's a KMC system, it's going to co-reside with systems from 25 years ago and run just everything interoperates, which is a great thing. How do you apply security to it? And how do you bring security to an existing building? And that was primarily the solution that we were demonstrating today, the portion of our solution, which was the retrofitting of a security to an existing platform, if you were by our booth. So just to wrap up, getting to the positive, why did we do this? Well, when Intel came to us and approached us, they said they've identified 5 million commercial buildings now that they feel would be candidates for the solution that we're talking about. And we could do the simple math and say X percentage is probably in each and every one of your territories, as well as a significant multi-tenant residential situation. I added the next two statistics. Why? Because I think at the beginning I mentioned we protect at the device level. Excuse me. So I think it's really important to see that there is a big number of device level things out there in buildings and going into buildings, which is really, really good because it comes as no surprise that correlates to revenue. And of course, that is why we do it. So that's just a little intro to why we approach the market, the challenges we saw. I'm going to call upon Derek, our CTO, to give you a bit of a technical background of how we address it and sort of the underpinnings of what some of you may have seen in the booth that we're showing, and then followed by how we implement it. They want you to hold this so that it's heard up there.
Excellent. So let's talk about Dome. But first, let's talk about what you all have today. And if you've come to our booth, you've probably heard this spiel a little bit already. Buildings today, as you all know, they're just unprotected. They're running open networks. Generally, they're running a Bacnet, Modbus, or KNX, depending on where you are in the world. And you've got your devices and controllers and stuff over there, and they've got controllers, and they're talking to them and making stuff happen, and your building management systems. And you probably have some cloud services so that building owners or you guys can actually access into the buildings remotely. And perhaps somewhere between the cloud service and the controllers, there may be a TLS session in there to protect it. But certainly, once you get into the blue, there's zero protection of anything going on there. So that's what you have today, and that's what the world lives with, and which is fine, except for all these people that are now getting into them and doing bad things. Also, you guys are all familiar with Bacnet. You probably know it like the back of the hand. I'm sure you guys know Bacnet better than me. But as you know, it's the most deployed building automation protocol here in North America. And as we've mentioned before, there's multiple ways you can deploy Bacnet. You can do it over IP networks. You can do it over MSTP, raw Ethernet. There's lots of ways of doing it. But as we all know, Bacnet itself is insecure. There's zero security involved with it. Doesn't matter what technology you're using. Some people can say, well, I'll just run the wire and conduit. Well, that's fine, but the conduit has to end somewhere. And if you have physical access to that wire, you can now get onto the network. And once you're on the network, you can pretty much do anything you want. There's nothing stopping any packet from going to anywhere and telling any command to any device on the network. There's no encryption, so anyone can see all the traffic going across. There's no authentication. So as I said, if you get access to that wire, you can now just send a packet. There's nothing stopping you or preventing you from doing that. So pretty much anyone can send any message to any device. So it's just a wild, wild west on Bacnet networks. So this is why we brought in our Dome building automation solution. So the first thing it does is it secures Bacnet. If you've come to our demo, we've shown you how we can actually take Bacnet and encrypt it and authenticate the devices, so it will protect your packets and keep your stuff secure. We can auto-provision devices. So as we all know, provisioning devices can be a lot of work. It can be a lot of time and effort. And provisioning security, oh my God, I don't even think about that. You know, I just want to try and get my stuff in there. So we want to make that as seamless as possible. So we have developed an auto-provisioning system where literally the installer can just take the device and take our Sentry device and plug it in, and the security gets provisioned automatically from the network. So this can manage all your keys and certificates and credentials automatically. So again, you don't have to think about it. The system does it for you. This is the magic of Dome. And as a result, it will authenticate all of your devices and your buildings. So the device authenticates to the building authenticates to the device. So you know that you have authentic devices, you know the device is in the right building. It will prevent you from having an unauthentic or unauthorized device access a building. So just because you have a device that is Dome enabled, if it's not in the right building, it won't work either. So it has to be provisioned and brought to the right building. So you're having like Alice is talking to Alice, Bob talking to Bob, and you can't go cross. And that's what you want to happen, because you want to prevent the cross-contamination of communication going between devices. So it prevents unauthorized access to your OT networks. And that's really what you want. So let me talk a little bit about how we secure Bacnet. And this is going to get into the details of the technology. So hopefully you guys can follow along. I'm sure you guys will enjoy this. But Dome BA has three main features and functions that we've implemented. So the first is our tunnel service. The tunnel service is when you have two devices that are sitting on Bacnet, and we set up the tunnel. And once the tunnel is set up, these two are talking and securing the communication between them. And this is one of the things we've shown in our demo. In order to set up a tunnel, we have the tunnel setup service, again, something that we're demonstrating over there, where the two devices actually authenticate to each other. They pass certificates back and forth and are able to generate a session and set that tunnel up, and then they're communicating over that tunnel. And before that can happen, the devices actually have to get provisioned. So we have a Dome provisioning service, and this is the automated key management, certificate management, authorization management that happens off the network. So the devices get that from the network. We can push out new keys, we can push out updates, we can push out new configurations to the devices in a secure way. And by building this all together, we can build a secure network. So what does that look like? So here's a picture of the tunnel service. You have your two devices that are talking back and forth and can be talking over a Bacnet network of any type. And what we're doing is we're tunneling Bacnet within Bacnet. So you take a standard Bacnet packet, your APDU, your application data, and we encrypt it and put it into a Bacnet network message that goes between the devices. So this picture here actually comes out of the Bacnet spec, if you've ever looked at that, to see what it looks like. So this is actually working within the Bacnet protocol. So as you saw, we have Wireshark running up. So if you have a Bacnet-capable Wireshark, you'll see that there's Bacnet traffic going on, but you won't be able to see what the data is because it's all encrypted. So unless you have those keys, you won't be able to see it, which is exactly what you want, because the bad guy can run Wireshark and see the traffic too, and that's how he gets in. The second step is the tunnel setup service. So this is where the Dome devices can automatically set this tunnel up. So as soon as one device wants to talk to another device, it will basically say, do I have a ability to do that? Do I have a tunnel? And if the answer is no, it then starts the tunnel setup service automatically. And this works at the Bacnet network layer, where it will exchange certificates at the network layer and generate a session key from that, verify authorization data to make sure that you can even talk to each other, and only once that's done will it set up the tunnel. So this allows you to have confidentiality of the data, integrity of the data, and authenticity of the endpoints, and authorization of the endpoints to make sure, A, I'm allowed to talk to you, B, I am the one who's talking to you and it's not him talking to you, and C, the data hasn't been changed in transit. This is a correct message, and it's not a message that he recorded and replayed. So there's a lot of protections going on at this level to make sure that the data is secure and an attacker can't get in and do something bad. The third service I mentioned is the Dome provisioning service, which is our magic sauce. There's a bunch of steps that it does. So it can do a proof of ownership. So when you have a device that's coming in, you want to make sure that when your device is provisioning, especially when it's auto-provisioning, you want to make sure that it's being provisioned by somebody who is the correct person to provision it. So you don't want an attacker to be able to go to your device and say, hey, I'm going to provision you because I'm your owner. So you actually have the owner authenticate to the device to provision it. So that prevents an attacker from changing the configuration on your devices. We have our zero-touch deployment and provisioning, which is something we were demonstrating earlier, where basically you plug the device in and it provisions all the security for you automatically. So you don't have to think about it as you're going from device to device. We also have secure management of the device. So once the device is online and on your secure network, you can use a centralized console or even a cloud service to re-provision or change the provision or update the provisioning on those devices. Some stuff is automatic. So part of the Bacnet messages is a network key for broadcast messages, which is controlled and updated and managed automatically from Dome. But also the certificates that are being provisioned can be re-provisioned and updated. So you don't have to have long-lived certificates. So for a TLS management solution, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but I'm going to mention it now. For TLS, you have to generate certificates for your devices. And those certificates have a lifetime, and once they expire, well, either the device stops working or you have to go re-provision new certificates on. So if you don't have an automated way to refresh those certificates like Dome, then you're going to have to go out there and re-provision your devices at a frequent level, or you have a vulnerability where these certificates are going to be valid for a very long time. The final thing about Dome is we use blockchain to manage the ownership of these devices. So these devices have pedigrees to prove ownership, which is how the proof of ownership works. And this ownership is stored in a blockchain for the lifetime of the device. So let's go step back into that, what the building looks like when you put this in. So now we have your access HVAC and lighting controllers talking to your devices. But now we have, instead of just using regular Bacnet, we're running Bacnet IP with Dome. So now we have a protected network from the controllers down to the devices. And on the back end, we have our Dome server, which is sitting in the cloud, or in certain cases, sitting locally. And any other cloud services that may be required for places that can do it. So now we have TLS protection on the left, going from the cloud services down to our controllers. And then we have our protected Bacnet or Dome BA Bacnet inside your network. So we now have full encryption and authentication and protection of all your devices. So as Louis mentioned, this works great if you have your devices that have our software built into them, but there's a lot of retrofitting that has to happen. Any devices that are currently out in the world today, which is all of them today, don't have our software embedded in them. So you're not going to go and replace all those devices immediately, so that's where the Dome Sentry comes in. So the Dome Sentry is a bump in the wire, which goes between the device and the network and brings that existing device into the secure network and gives it access to that secure network. So these adapters would go in front of generally each device. We can talk about if it's necessarily one-to-one or not. It doesn't have to be, but the most secure way is doing it a one-to-one. And that basically allows that legacy Bacnet device access to your secure network. And it will protect that device from attacks coming from the other side. The bottom kind of shows a block diagram of what this Dome Sentry device looks like, where you effectively have an Ethernet in on one side where you get Bacnet Sc or Bacnet or Dome BA, and on the other side you'd have just regular Bacnet IP. But also this can work on MSTP. So you can have a Dome-enabled MSTP on one side and a regular unprotected MSTP on the other. So we can actually do this for MSTP strings as well.
So it's a single device that does IP and
That's still to be determined. And we'll see. Probably for size purposes, I suspect they're going to be two different devices, because otherwise it'd be a much bigger box. So probably there'll be two devices, but that's something we can talk about. So here's a whole thing of how a retrofit would work. And it's actually not even a true retrofit, because this is talking about retrofitting old technology, current technology, new technology, and future technology doesn't even exist yet. So you could have some devices that have Bacnet Sc down the road when Bacnet Sc finally comes out. And those that have Dome inside, Dome can manage the SC certificates. So I was talking about how hard it can be to manage TLS. Dome can take care of that for you. We have Bacnet Sc or Bacnet Dome BA going into our Dome Sentry bump in the wire boxes that can go into a standard Bacnet IP legacy device. And you can have devices that have Dome BA directly into them, which we're working with KMC to get that into their next generation of devices. On the left-hand side, we have their security gateway, something we call a Dome interface appliance, which is a way to get it's a local controller that can sit on Commander, and it interfaces the local devices up to the Dome server. Dome server is sitting up on AWS cloud, or again, for those areas where you can't put it in the cloud, we can put it locally into the system. So just as a summary, the Dome core features that we have, and this is the Dome for IoT in general. So we have our device credential management, so it manages the credentials on the devices themselves. Our zero-touch deployment, so the plug-and-play of your device. You plug it in, it provisions itself onto the network, gets all the credentials that it needs to get onto the network. So that will reduce your effort to do installations. Proof of ownership. So this is where the building proves the ownership of the device. So this is protecting your device from an attacker who might try to change its configuration in an unauthorized way. But in the same time, then you also have the device to building authentication. So the device itself is authenticating to the building. So that proves that it's an authentic device, that's actually a KMC and not some counterfeit from somewhere. And also it's proving that is the device that's supposed to be communicating. This can give you some a secure supply chain. So you can verify that the devices are coming from where they're coming from. And one of the other features of Dome is secure firmware delivery and management. So these devices that are out and deployed, we can push out firmware updates to them and allow the devices to update. So in short, the summary from this whole slide, that the one takeaway is Dome is going to make it easier for you to install, maintain, and update your devices in buildings. The summary of the Dome building automation features is all that plus more. But wait. So in addition to all the features that we just talked about, which is just for IoT in general, once we add our building automation specific features, this is going to secure all your Bacnet traffic. So it's going to encrypt and authenticate all your packets so that only authorized devices can communicate to each other. It still has your zero-touch device auto configuration. So you have zero-touch provisioning, but also can remove the human error of the deployment of these devices. So errors that humans can cause just because there's lots of controls to do, and humans make mistakes. So by removing the human from a lot of these configurations, by literally just saying security on, and everything else, all the security aspects of that get managed from the system directly. And in-place key management. So again, it reduces and removes all the human aspects of having to manage the security keys and rollovers of keys and making sure your certificates are valid and up to date. All this is automated by Dome BA. So we mentioned a lot, we've been talking a lot about Bacnet IP here. We can secure Bacnet MSTP as well. It's because Dome BA works over any Bacnet transport. It can work over IP, it can work over raw Ethernet, it can work over MSTP. Our technology, because of where it sits at the Bacnet layer, can work over anything. So we can encrypt and authenticate your MSTP traffic. What it does require is that the gateway needs to be aware of the Dome BA protocols. So you can't just take an off-the-shelf router to go from Bacnet IP to a secure MSTP. It has to be aware of the protocols that we're introducing. Also, all devices on a particular MSTP string have to be protected. So it's either all on or all off. You can't have a mix of them on a particular MSTP string. You can have different strings on one router where one is all protected and one is not. So that's okay, but one string has to, is either on or off. And you still need to manually configure your MSTP device IDs. That we can't auto-provision that. That's just a limitation of MSTP itself. But all the other configuration can be managed by Dome. So the result of that is you can get your authenticated end-to-end data from any device to any other device, regardless of whether it's MSTP, IP, Ethernet, or anything else. So what about Bacnet Sc? That's come up a few times. Some people have asked about it. Bacnet Sc is the future of Bacnet security. However, there's some limitations to what it can do. First of all, it only works on IP-based networks. It does not work on MSTP. There's no standard provisioning for Bacnet Sc. So that means right now you have to configure your TLS for Bacnet Sc manually, or each vendor may provide a provisioning solution, but if you are provisioning multiple vendors, you're going to have different provisioning solutions out there. And it still requires human intervention anyways, because again, it's not an automated solution. It's not the plug and play that we're providing. There's other things to consider with Bacnet Sc. MSTP, as you all know, is widely deployed. And even new buildings are still being deployed with MSTP, as you well know. So the result, Bacnet Sc, it'll be out there and it's going to be used to protect your trunk lines. It's going to go from your controller and perhaps your backbone, but it's not going to be protecting all your devices. It's only going to be protecting your devices that can run TLS, which is going to be your bigger things. But it's not going to get down to your edge devices. But we can still integrate Bacnet Sc in with Dome. We can support the missing features of Bacnet Sc. So we can provision Bacnet Sc devices. So we can automate your certificate delivery. We can automate your certificate refresh. We can automate your device configurations as well. So all the automation of the provisioning that we can provide for Bacnet Sc. So again, this will reduce your human errors, improve your solution security as well, because again, there's nothing wrong with Bacnet Sc. It's a good security solution. It's just limited in its effectiveness and what it can do. And Dome BA can interface and work with Bacnet Sc. We can use and create a Bacnet Sc to Dome BA gateway that would allow you to have a SC network that talks to the BA network. So you can still get the devices to communicate to each other just fine, and it can all be managed by Dome. So just a quick summary of Dome building automation before I hand it over to Drake is that this is going to make it easier for you to install, maintain, and update devices in your building. It secures all communications between all your devices in the building. It prevents unauthorized devices from joining your OT network, reading the data that's going across it, accessing it, sending messages to devices on there. And it will bring together all types of Bacnet networks on your site, regardless of what technology it's using, IP, MSTP, Bacnet Sc, or others. So, Drake?
Thank you. So early on in the development of our secure Bacnet solution, we realized that we needed to put a large emphasis on the ability to interoperate with all other Bacnet devices out there. So to that end, we brought in a lot of KMC equipment. We brought in a lot of installed test software, some of which you may use, Yabe, for example, and Symmetrics. And we also brought in some other third-party type Bacnet equipment. And at some point, we realized that we reached diminishing returns with this equipment. And so the next logical step was to go out and actually install this equipment, our equipment, into real buildings with existing Bacnet components. So mostly Lewis reached out to his extensive contacts and identified several buildings, several candidate buildings that would be ideal for us to go into and install our equipment. And we were seeking buildings that maybe had an unoccupied floor so that we could go in there with our early prototypes and install things and make sure that, we didn't bring down, occupied portions of the building and so on. We have some POCs, we call them POCs, proof of concept demos, running in several places. And typically, when we first go in, we see a configuration such as this. It's basically a building management system that's communicating with several Bacnet routers on an IP network. And then behind the routers, I don't show this here, but behind the routers could be lots of MSTP-based equipment. And what we do is we come in with these Sentinel devices that Derek talked about, and we like to put one behind each of these Bacnet IP devices in the building. And so this is sort of the configuration that you would see, and the protected communication lines are shown in purple. And then as a next phase, and by the way, going back here, the devices are configured manually in this particular configuration. And so the next phase is to install a DIA type device that Derek talked about, perhaps a DIA running in a commander, KMC commander, so that when the bump and the wire devices come online, they can receive their provisioning automatically by way of this DIA device. And so this is the zero-touch nature of the configuration that Derek talked about. And also, if the building owner is amenable to this, we like to put in a device that gives us access to the building remotely. So we would typically put in a cellular-based modem, and we would use that modem to come in occasionally and monitor the devices, and to, in some cases, early on at least, maybe update some of the firmware in our bump and the wire devices. The other thing that this remote capability gives us, we put this in together with a log aggregation type device. And all of the bump and the wires running on the network are feeding log data to the central box at the bottom there. And the box accumulates that, and we can make that data available to a remote dashboard. If you came into the demo room, you might have seen that running with a live demo feed. We've actually gone into several buildings where we weren't putting our installation into an occupied floor, but a real active building with tenants and so on. And so just to sort of make things easier for the building owner, just to kind of alleviate any kind of concern they might have if, for some reason, again, early on, something went wrong. We built up a couple of these installations where we provided a Ethernet bypass switch. So if the building owner or supervisor or manager thought something went wrong, they could quickly go in there and flip a couple switches and bypass what we had put in. So we work typically with KMC in helping to identify the ideal candidate building. And usually this starts with identifying the existing components in the building. We like to get a drawing that shows the network topology. We like to get a list of the devices that are in there, just so we can assess whether or not this makes sense for us to go in and install. And by the way, I'm mentioning all of these details because we are seeking to partner with SIs to go in there and do additional POCs. So if you're an SI and you're working with a customer that you think has a candidate building, we're looking to sign you up. See us after the presentation, maybe we can partner in one of these installations. This is a typical drawing that we would receive from a building just to evaluate it to make sure that it's something that we can work with. I know you can't see all the details from when you're sitting, but it gives us the Bacnet network IDs and IP addresses for some of the devices in there, and it's basically everything we need to determine whether or not this is a suitable building for what we're doing at this stage. Of course, the idea was to go in there and test the system and work out some of the bugs, and certainly we did find some issues early on. One of the things we realized was that for any given network, we needed to make sure that we protected all the devices. So it's either all the devices get our protection or not. So, you know, in some of the products, we can isolate a portion of the network and just protect that. So we would have two separate networks, one secure, one insecure. But in general, for any given network, we have to have, that has IP devices on their Bacnet IP devices, we have to have a bump in the wire device in front of each one of those. We also received some good coaching from some of KMC's system integrators that in a lot of cases, they like to be able to configure the devices in place using typically the web admin page that's installed. And so for that, they need to be able to pass non-Bacnet traffic through our devices. And early on, by definition, we were blocking all of that traffic. So, you know, once we understood the need for this, we reconfigured the devices, and now we're allowing non-Bacnet traffic, particularly HTTP, to get in there to allow you to reach the admin pages of these devices. And also, we had one minor issue where the SI came into a building and started to pull down some very large log files for whatever it is they do. And there were some minor issues related to Bacnet segmentation and IP level fragmentation. And so we cleared that up. All of the installations we have right now use a kind of an off-the-shelf product that we've reconfigured and put software on as the bump in the wire device. The next phase is to go in there with a better solution for bump in the wire in terms of its flexibility and so on. And in particular, this device that we're targeting will use a field programmable gate array made by Intel, one of our partners. And the advantage of using a field programmable gate array over a typical microprocessor-based solution is that you can configure it in software. You can configure the hardware in software, so you can adapt it for different interfaces. So this gentleman asked about whether or not we can support Bacnet IP and Bacnet MSTP in the same device. Well, a field programmable gate array would allow you to do that just by changing the bitstream image. Also, as you can imagine, a lot of our operations require intensive cryptographic calculations. And with a hardware-based FPGA in the product, we can offload the processor that would normally be doing these computations in software. We can offload those operations into hardware. And typically, hardware is a lot faster than software. So that's another advantage of an FPGA. But most importantly, the initial bump in the wire devices that we've installed don't have the ability to lock out the keys in the way that we feel is secure enough. But this particular device, it's called the Max 10 by Intel, allows us to put private key material and other sensitive information into the flash memory and then lock it up from the outside so that you can't access it over programming interfaces and so on. So it provides a much more secure solution for the next phase of these pilot deployments. Louis, I think.
Back up.
Finish up.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Drake. Thank you, Derek. So I'm the layperson guy who says very, very briefly with all the things you've seen, we don't replace anything that's in place. All the tunneling and services and everything you've seen are operating over compliant Bacnet platforms that you probably already have in place now. Bump in the wires that we've piloted and now moving to the Intel platforms where we want to now pilot and work with you in terms of your customers on the Intel platform, which is also, as many of you were at the morning session, saw Intel's presence as well as the people behind the Max 10 who are here, are also part of the partnership. So they're here to support us and you in terms of going to market and explaining the technology that we're giving you a very quick but detailed implementation to. So let me just wrap up a little bit in terms of what we're doing. And by the way, my last point would be the simplest, and I always go, well, that's really great, Derek, in 15 slides. I go, you know a little padlock in the bottom of your browser when you go to do banking? Just think of us as doing that between one Bacnet device and another Bacnet device. We're just creating a secure connection between those two things, doing it very, very simply and transparent to your building owner, and now life is good. So we're providing real-time protection to the edge. It's a software solution. So in fact, we've had a couple of unique opportunities brought to us where our standard gateways and platforms, and there's router technology working on with KMC and that may address it. And there's a few new things that we may want to do, which would then be applicable to everybody in the market. And the benefit of both an FPGA platform and being software. Retrofit. Benefit here, you all have customers now and may be thinking of customers who could use security. And again, if you have an installation there, you'll be able to go back to it. There's a lot of other security features in detail, and we'll be working with the KMC team, both in terms of training materials and other support materials that will explain this not only to you, but then also to your customers in terms of data integrity, authenticity, the blockchain, how we manage and secure the supply chain. Again, not a big issue in your sector at the moment, but it may also help in large implementations, managing a lot of devices in the field and how they go out. And finally, as we mentioned earlier, some DoD and US government air gap requirements. There's actually a general IoT and cybersecurity focus from the US government we're all hearing about, some of which is going to be supported with actual dollars in the marketplace, and we're pretty excited about that. So just to step back, because we saw a lot of detail levels and drawings and what have you, what does Dome look like as a solution at a high level? And there's a couple of just basic parts. We've heard about the Dome server. It's doing the provisioning. So you've heard all this, we're going to be provisioning, you're going to need to provision and what have you. Dome server enables that. And in fact, the interface appliance manages inside your operation or inside KMC's operation, if they're provisioning the devices before they go to the field, the actual components going in. When the site product is on site, the interface appliance again brings the device into the network, but that's it. Once it's running in the building, it's going to run as it is now between the building automation controller and the device. If you're retrofitting, there'll be a Dome Sentry or bump in the wire device also as part of it. And that really, at a simple level, is what the solution looks like or what the system looks like. There's a few other services, and today we're not going to go into it again. We were showing, and some of you, we pulled them up, but there'll be some connectivity capabilities. There's a dashboard that Drake mentioned. So again, if you do have connectivity or want to provide the service, you can do that. There's a prototype screen of a mobile platform we're doing. So on a daily basis, whether it be on a dashboard through the IoT through the Commander platform or through mobile phone, your customers will be reminded every day that you're keeping them secure and what's going on in the building. So there's a variety of other tools that in this brief session we're not going to get into today. Few key points for you. So what does a business model look like? So you're going to have Dome Sentry, the bump in the wire devices from KMC, which you'll be able to take into the building. It's a hardware device, much like you sell many hardware devices today. There'll be some implementation and installation services you may provide with that. Later, there will be Dome-enabled KMC products. So the products that you're installing now, at a later point in time, will come with Dome inside. That is great. So those are devices you sell, devices you install. And then the Dome server provides that monitoring. So much like the alarm system in your house, if you have one, you're probably using a monitoring service of some sort because you do want to know if something happens or you want the fire department to be notified. So we're providing a monitoring service to ensure that the devices are authentic. We're providing a monitoring service so that the data logs are there, which you may use for managing and securely enabling devices, and for the building to see it as part of the Commander dashboard. That is a SaaS service. That's software as a service. It's a monthly subscription. And again, it's a revenue opportunity, and the beauty there is it's an ongoing revenue opportunity to you as a system integrator. And again, things that'll be part of the program. So we're putting together the program now, and we're putting together the typical components, as I understand it, that you would get from your partner KMC, which is training materials and training, marketing support in terms of in-field programs. Because of the technical nature of this product initially, we plan to provide, as KMC does with us, pre-sales technical support. Drake showed you some of the schematics we look at. We'll provide support in the initial pilots, looking at your customers' platforms to assist with how the implementation happens as you're trained and get used to the system. As well as we do want to provide one pilot to you in your territory. So as you've spoken to us at the booth, you know we've said, please give us your cards, please sign up for the partner program, and we will provide you a pilot platform for you to put in the territory, both as a reference site. So really, all we're asking for is let us know you want to be part of the program. There's nothing more than that from the commitment side to sign up. We do need a commitment to attend the training, be part of the program, and we are asking that we try to establish that initial pilot in each of your territories in the first 90 days. And that is as easy and clean as we could make it. I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of what we're doing. So just to wrap up in terms of what we've done, we see that there's a big cybersecurity need now, as I said in my intro, the building industry sees it. We're reading about it in the news. We think it's a great opportunity. It's a revenue opportunity for you, and it's one not only for new buildings you may be quoting on or looking at, but also hopefully existing customers. There are several revenue streams attached to this, because we know as much as we all want to do good, protect buildings, you are in business, why are we in business? And so there's not only the secure products, we're going to simplify some of the steps. And again, even in Bacnet Sc, which is, I should say, and we're working with them, and it's a great product and platform, which is out now in terms of the specs. But yes, there will be issues in how it gets implemented. And the underlying technology is TLS. Derek kept referencing TLS. That is the underlying current platform for Bacnet Sc. So we help with that. And then all the other values that we talked about in terms of trying to lower the delivery cost to the market. And again, we've done this, and I've done this when I'm talking to landlords. I'm saying, hey, you could have a secure building, tell your tenants, and we're doing some marketing for that purpose so they can promote that their building is cyber safe and they're taking steps to protect the infrastructure, because the building next door may not. And if you're trying to compete in today's market, I'm in the East Coast, so I will tell you there's a lot of competition for not only getting people back into buildings in New York, but how you get them back in and under what circumstance. And I think if you have two landlords standing there and one can say, my building's cyber safe, and you typically don't have to educate the people going into the building what that means, it's a differentiator. So I think that as you as a system integrator can say, hey, do you want a secure platform in your building, or do you want a platform? And I think in another session they talked about what reasonableness is in terms of liability and what have you. And we're actually suggesting even that we may offer a period of time where you can provide the security at no charge. So much like XM Radio, 6 months later, maybe you say, would you like me to turn the security off? And that may be a good way to pitch a subscription. We don't know. We'll look for your feedback on that. But it will also create additional opportunities, because again, this is a platform over your network. So whether you're putting thermostats, air handlers, chillers, and all these other things I'm learning about, there's smart lighting, access controls, fire control systems. Bacnet is a pretty broad platform. Some of you may sell other products beyond the HVAC platforms, and it may create other additional opportunities. So again, my last point is, if we haven't spoken to you, and I know we've spoken to many in the room, we encourage you to just give us a card or give your KMC person a card, and we would love to work with you in terms of launching this program, which is starting right after this show, this conference. Anyways, I wanted to leave some time because I knew there'd be a lot of stuff there and questions. My stuff is easy, so if we have any questions or anything we can answer now, If you're securing the system, yes. And
So if you plan to make a secure MSTP network, then yes, you would need to either replace or update the existing routers so that they can transmit the security between them.
That's something I'm assuming could be firmware updatable, all that is worked out.
That's the goal, but we're working with KMC to figure out if that's the case.
So I couldn't just put a bump on the wire on
So
the P side and the IP side to secure all of that? That's what I was assuming how it was set up.
we'd have to figure that out if that's actually going to work. I don't know if that will work because there's some additional traffic that needs to happen from the devices back to the DIA, which might not happen in that case. So we'd have to think about it with that if that's a possibility. So we'll have to research that.
So right now, I mean, you've got a bumper wire like in front of your front end, whatever that is, the Jace or total control or command or whatever, then you have another bumper wire in front of the router, and that provides that security.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, you can absolutely do it from on the IP network. You can do it in front of all of your devices. But the question was, if you're going across a router, can you have a bump in the wire on one side of the router and another bump in the wire on the other side of the router?
So the router we were playing
So-
on Monday, right? I just thought I could, I guess I didn't ask the question then, but I assumed I could just put a bump on the wire on the MSTP side, so I could have hit the dozen devices or whatever we were talking to with those bump out of wire, and that would secure the MSTP network too? Or not?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
So they're securing the IP from the Jace to the back of the router, so from the router down to the MSTP networks for the device. That's not
Oh, but it's coming.
But it's coming.
Yeah, because I'm assuming that if you don't secure the MSTP network, then
You still got a
if the vulnerabilities come from there, what's the point, right?
Right.
They're on the network, then we'll.
And they're already working on it, so.
Okay.
Right.
In that case, you'd be isolated to those 12 devices. If you're bumping the wires on the other side, then typically in the Bacnet, you can go pretty broad when you're in that two-wire connection, that if you're bumping the wires there, you're only going to be allowed to those 12 devices that you may be hardwired in today.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the MSTP work is still still under development. All of our work at this point and the releases today are the IP side.
We've done one Ethernet, if I remember right, back then over Ethernet, which is very similar, and it's atypical. Yeah.
Yeah, not many people do it. It's-
Let's see, any other questions? I'm sorry?
Do they ever catch these people?
Tattoo people?
Ever catch
Oh.
any of these people?
Oh,
Bad guys.
oh, no. Shoot. No, we've been having, like I said, we've been having probably too much fun going out to the sites and all that, and I really like the passion these guys have and the knowledge they bring, and it's really neat to see. I mean, this really is real secure, and it's not just any kind of security. I guess they do an efficient job with, because anytime you add security or encryption, it can bloat the network with big long messages and all that. They've done a really good job of making it efficient in that performance-wise, and also this is supposed to be how big the message is on your network. It's instead of being this big, it's still only it only adds a little bit. So they've done a really good job with that. So we're really glad to partner with them and keep on going. I don't know, Tim, do you have anything more? I want to pick on you.
I don't have any questions.
Oh,
I'll say it though.
okay. I feel like a game show host, right? How's that go?
I got plenty of words. Yep. So just like what Dave said, this is super cool technology. We've been building it with them for over a year now, traveling to New York City several times and eating outside under the covers of, and space heaters. And but it's really neat, and it's iterative, but it's also very, very forward thinking. And so by coming to us and signing up, what you're saying is, yes, I want to be a part of this cutting edge technology, and I want to learn more about it. I want to ask more questions, and now I want to go find a customer and just secure the trunk, right? You're not securing an entire building with these first proof of concepts. You're just saying, let's go pick 3, 4, 5 devices that are central to the system, that are connected to the IT network, that may have vulnerabilities from outside, and let's go see it happen. Let's go see how it works. If you haven't seen the demo, it's a couple clicks of Ethernet cables and it's in, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible. So as we continue to do these POCs, we're going to continue to do trainings, continue to do more conversations with Dave, and the more cigars, the more he'll help. So, okay. You say one more thing, and then I'll
say one more thing. No, and kind of get back to the Bacnet Sc. To me, the temptation to go with these guys is it really is a full, complete system where you don't have to worry about your certifications and all that, whereas that part of it and your authentication, that part of it's left out of the Bacnet Sc standard yet on purpose, because there are so many different ideas on how you do that, and they've already solved all that. So it's ready to go in that respect. So cool beans. Okay. And now you owe me a cigar, so okay.
So I have one more thing to say, but first let's give it up for Veridify. Thank them for being here. And then guys, this is the end of the summit. 2.5 days drinking from a fire hose, but having an absolute blast being together again. I really think that we should mark this moment, because for a lot of us, it's the first time that, we've seen all of each other again since going through this very difficult time. It's difficult for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, but we so appreciate you. We love being partners with you. We love your guys' enthusiasm. I hope you're fired up. We're always here for you. We're always ready to help anytime. Okay? So travel safe. If you're not leaving yet, then party safe. Broadway is open tonight. So, yes. Yeah. I'll see you out there, Ryan. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.